welcome everyone. I hope everyone can see Doogie's screen. This is session 4AJ for feedback purposes, and I'll turn it over to Doogie and Henry. Take it away.
Right, if folks can scan that QR code on the front page, you might get the link to the feedback page. I'm Dougie, and Henry will talk in a minute. We're going to talk about what we did last December. So this was starting on the 1st of December 2020 through to roughly the 24th. I don't think I went the whole way. So it's a little game that we were playing through a website, which will give you details of it partway through the presentation. So first, a bit of administrivia. There's a charity raffle. There's another URL for you guys to click on or type in or somehow otherwise give the money. I could do it like Bob Geldof and, you know, give me all your money. Right. There's a QR code, which I guess takes you to the Virgin Money URL as well. This year, it's the RNLI and the Guide Dogs, so that seems to be a wonderful pair of charities. So this is session 4 Alpha Juliet, 4AJ. If you're interested in what we did in December, stick around. If you're not interested and you're in the wrong session, stick around anyway. Or now's the opportunity to leave and go and find the session you really wanted to go and watch today, rather than a desperate amount of excitement here. So there's two of us. There's me, I'm Dougie. I've worked in IT since 1981. I've worked with IMS since 1982, and I've got more than 40,000 posts on the Raspberry Pi forum. If you want to send me email, please send me email. If you want to send me tweets, please send me tweets. I don't buy. If you send me a question, especially if it's about IMS or DB2, I will try and find you an answer. Last year, so this was December 2020, I did the advent of code in COBOL. We've heard lots about COBOL through the pandemic, because people went, why are you running that 60-year-old crap? The answer is because we're running the 60-year-old stuff that works. That I think it was the Americans and their unemployment benefit offices who had the most amount of exposure to why we're running old COBOL. Well, we're running old COBOL because it works, and we'll talk about that more later on. Henry, he's my Dutch friend and colleague and hacker, and he'll tell you some more words about Henry.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Dougie. Well, you can just, press them on. That may be easier. You were saying working on the mainframe since 81. That was about the year I was born, a bit earlier, but not too much. Do have a good 20 years of mainframe time behind me already, and I hope at least 20 up front. Certified mainframe junkie. I founded the great open source tool Ziggy, which I think I've presented on 2 years in a row here in Stewart's Track. I dabble a bit with the GuideShare Europe and then the Dutch region. Due to all my cool community work, IBM has titled me an IBM champion, which is always a cool title to flash. And yeah, my Twitters and emails are there as well, should you want to reach out. And I did last year's Advent of Code in REXX. And the thing we kind of wanted to bring to you today is our experience on it, bring you maybe some nice things to do over the dark days before Christmas, maybe get some students hooked up into joining us. And let's take it away and see what we did last year and how COBOL and REXX compare a bit in competitive solutions and maybe some real world usage examples. it's yours again, Dougie.
Right, so we had an encounter. This encounter was some 6 years ago. I think it involved Henry buying me some beers, which is probably why I'm half asleep at the time, because I usually spent an awful lot of the real world GSE conferences with a beer in my hand.
Ditto.
So and Henry says ditto there. So I think the worst one was when I worked for IBM, I put in expenses and I deliberately left the price of the beers out of the expenses claim. And then the folks who paid the expenses charged me a second time for the price of the beers. So effectively, a round of beers that had cost about 10 quid ended up costing me close to 40. Be very afraid if you put your beers on your hotel bill. I don't do that anymore. I just pay across the bar with a card. So that's us, and this is the history of when we first physically met, although we'd worked together in previous years anyway. So we're going to talk about this advent of code, right? And this is a game. It's been running a few years now. There's a guy called Eric Wastel, and what he does is every day through December, he publishes a new programming challenge. Some programming challenges are related to the day befores. Some are entirely new, but it's effectively, he's doing it like a little story where you've got a journey from home to the island where the treasures are to be found. And each day when you finish coding your program and you get it to run, you get another key to the puzzle. Most of the puzzles are in 2 parts, and the answer from the first part usually gives you the starter for the second part. The other thing with the second part is it's often take your original program and modify it to do extra programming, extra coding, extra analysis of the input. So I did it in COBOL because I'm mad. I am certified. I'm a certified IMS systems programmer, and I've been writing COBOL, usually small examples to say, how does that work? Why does that work? I'll show you how it works. You know, this is the role, because I've worked in tech support and I've spent 20 years working for IBM Software Support Center. So my COBOL is never really a finished program. It's an example of how to run an SQL call in DB2 or how to run a DL1 call in IMS. So I, like a crazy loon, said, oh, I'll do the advent of code in COBOL. Henry is a strong REXX programmer, so he decided to do the programming in REXX. So the idea of pick something you're uncomfortable with, pick something you know well and just run through the puzzle every day. But my view of when folks say, what programming language should I use? The answer is always the one you know best or the one you'd like to learn tomorrow. So I've been writing rubbish COBOL for many, many years. So I decided to do it in COBOL to see if there was anything I would find that would make my COBOL better. And that was the reason for doing it. Also, everyone else was doing it in C, JavaScript, C++, Haskell, Rust. I don't think anybody was mad enough to do it in Bash. I don't think anybody was mad enough to do it in BASIC. So this is a public competition. It's available to everybody. And it's Eric has been running it for many, many years. So tail end of this month, we can sharpen our coding pencils and we can head off to the advent of code /2021. And it's a free form competition. It's pick what you'd like to do, pick what language you'd like to do it in, and you don't have to complete every task, although it gets better if you do. And I'll let Henry talk about the next slide.
Oh yeah. Yeah, here's an actual copy from day one, part one of last year's Advent of Code. Like Dougie was saying, it's really every year like a story as well. You can kind of see it. I always see it like a reverse escape room, right? You have to get out of the solution, but you know, there's this story. The story last year was you needed to, I don't know, get to the island. Indeed, I kind of forgot the story because you get swamped up in the coding challenges. But this is what you will see, right? So you'll get a little story that you get points per day. So for the first part, if you solve it, you get a silver star. And if you solve the second bit, you get the gold star. So here's actually the first bit for last year. You get a whole bunch of, fitting again with the beer expense reports, but you get an expense report and you need to find 2 entries that add up to 2020. A very basic logic puzzle to solve that you can solve in any language you would like. So you get an example first, you know, which is a very small input of a couple of numbers, and you have to think of an algorithm, a function, maybe sometimes a larger program to solve that puzzle. You can try it with the example, see if you add up to, what is it here, 51579, 514579. And then when you think, oh, my program looks good enough to work, you hammer the give me my real input, and every player gets different input. Eric is doing a great job in making this a very multiplayer game. So it's not like, you know, everybody gets the same input file. The input files that you have to solve your puzzle on are usually umpteen times bigger than the example. And then you run your code, you type the answer, and if it's correct, you continue to day 2. If it's wrong, well, you get to try again. And if you do it wrong like a couple of times in a row, there's also this like penalty where you have to wait a couple of minutes before you can file your next answer. I'd say you can skip to the next one, Dougie, please. Right, yeah, you can maybe make all the bullets appear. Right, like I was saying, you write your program, solve the puzzle from the example, run it with the real input, pray to the coding gods that your answer is correct. And the further you get into the days, of course, it gets more difficult. There's more, you know, more subtle details you need to pay attention to in the explanation of the challenge. I've had a couple of times where the example was, you know, you fix it, you write some REXX in my case, and then you get the answer, then you run it with the real input, and my ZPDT would nearly take off because, you know, it didn't account for large inputs or make your code a bit smart. So it actually forces you to write, you know, I would say decent performing code as well. Yeah, like Dougie was saying as well, sometimes part 2 like elaborates on your solution from 1. Sometimes it's a very subtle change, and sometimes it continues on the thought process the puzzle should have brought you on. Yeah, edge cases are always a thing, but that's with every programming challenge. And I think, yeah, the best bullet yet. Sometimes you actually finish both parts of the puzzle, and sometimes you don't. Right? It's not always doable. Sometimes it just depends on your skill set of being able to think of an algorithm to solve the puzzle. In my case with REXX, and I think Dougie had the same pain in COBOL, sometimes the language is not really suitable to solve the problem in a decent manner. But once you do get the solutions, you get points on the leaderboard, which is of course the gaming aspect of it. And I think the next slide will show the leaderboard or some explanation. Yeah, there's like a global, I would say global leaderboard for everybody joining the Advent of Code. But they're all based on the Pacific Standard Time Zone. They open up at midnight every day leading up to Christmas. And the first person to solve it gets 100 points. The second one gets 99. And that, well, then gradually decreases to 0 points for the rest. but that's global. And unless you are really setting your alarm clock, you will never beat the Americans, because they just have more, more time to solve the puzzles. Luckily, Advent of Code allows for a private leaderboard. That's what I've been using for a couple of years as well. And I think that, well, our wish and plan, but we'll get to this later on, is for more of you, mainframe programmers, preferably to, chip in on the fun next year, join that private leaderboard, and then you don't have to compete with people in a, I would say, time zone closer to when the puzzle releases, but you get to compete in your own little bubble, if that makes sense. Of course, you can create your own private leaderboards as well to run this with your friends and colleagues, or if you're in a separate time zone, maybe. This is what that looks like, right? So you get, like, last year, 12 people joined this leaderboard. You see the gold stars. This is per day, right, from top to bottom. So day 1 up to day 24, probably, or 5. I'm not even sure. 24, I guess. If it's gold, that means part 1 and part 2 were solved. If it's silvery, only part 1 was solved. And if it's grayed out, it didn't get solved. And, well, you can see that some people solved a lot and other people were either struggling or just didn't finish it. Again, it doesn't matter for the fun factor, at least in my opinion. I think we can slide on. Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Here you.
This is mine. Yeah, this is my first slide. This is actually a useful slide for the interview question. Right? If you're a COBOL programmer, someone somewhere in an interview is going to say, "What's all that stuff at the top of a COBOL program?" And everyone will go, the folks who've just learned COBOL from a book will go, you have an environment division, an identification division, an input-output section, data division, working storage section. The real programmers will go, I don't know what goes in the top of a COBOL program. The first 20 lines are copied from the previous program. I just copy it every time. There's some noise there that makes it a COBOL program, but I don't know what it is. We've not, someone somewhere back in the midst of time said, here's a COBOL program, have a play with it. And I collected all of this first 20 lines and went, that'll do. There is an interesting comment on line 14, because you used to be able to tell COBOL how long your record was, but these days it infers it from the file structure, which starts at line 17. So in this case, I'm reading a 4-digit number and 76 characters of spaces. That's just because the input for day 1 was only ever going to be less than 9,999. Part 2, this is basically the tail end of the data division, and lines 21 to 28 are basically the working storage for my program. Line 21 is effectively a switch that I use to decide whether I've reached the end of a file. 77, the 277 elements there on 23 and 24 are where I'm going to build the results. And the number array is where I'm going to store the records that are pulled from the file. So as Henry was saying, they give you a file of 6 bytes on the example page. 6 records on the example page, but on the real input, I got 200 records. And you then have to run through the 200 records. Lines 30 through 40 here are basically open the file, read the file, stuff the value in an array. COBOL's brilliant. COBOL is a great language because to tell it to do something, you have to write 100 words. In a REXX program, to read a file, you give it one statement that basically says exec.io. This is exec.io written in COBOL. And then by line 44, I've got all the input stored in my array, and this is the code that actually runs the array and calculates the result. and this is the day one, part one, where we're looking for if result one equals 2020, that's on line 50, then display it. And then I'm running through, it's a very, very ugly join that I'm doing between, what I'm doing is joining every record, every number in the array with every other number in the array. It really is a brute force. It's desperately horrible way of coding it, but that's an ugly join done in COBOL. And at the bottom, line 60, stop run. Try running that in a Kix program. That's good for a laugh in a Kix program. Stop run. Seriously, don't ever stop run in a Kix program because bad things happen. Right, next page Henry will talk about his REXX way of doing it.
Oh yeah, thank you very much, Dougie. Yeah, we chopped it up in 20 lines per screen, or it would be either too small to read or too annoying to present on. My first 20 lines are a lot of, I would say, garbage as well, that just gives me some nice output. One of the things, and we'll get back to this later, but one of the things you really learn in a fun way when doing this advent of code is, without the pressure of deadlines with your business, but, for fun, you'll find the nice things. For me, line 4, 5, and 6 for an interactive REXX program, you keep running, just from TSO interactively. And you can see it in the comments. It's the best clear screen ever, right? You give 3 blank lines, and then at least, from line 7 onwards, it gets neatly on the top of your 3270 screen. It's basically just some, I have to say, absidic art with, what day, what part this is, and then the real code begins. As Dougie was saying, he needed a lot of lines of code and definitions and stuff in COBOL to open and read the file. In REXX, that goes a bit easier. It's actually 3 lines: allocate the input file, do the exec IO, and free the file again. So that's my first 20 lines. I then have the full input data set opened. I did program in some, I think, some performance measurements, to say the least, to see like the maximum amount of tries I needed to do on that input in order to know I've brute forced through the whole thing. And then, yeah, it's the same. The funny thing is, when me and Dougie started comparing our solutions, we've basically written the same logic. It's just in a different language. But I think that's true for all programming solutions / challenges, right? The logic is the same. It's just different words, different syntax.
Yeah,
so here I'm
in here, Henry. My view is that all programming languages are the same.
Yeah.
They just have syntactic anomalies. The classic one being Python with its left-hand white space, which forms part of the syntax. The C syntax is curly brackets. The Algol syntax is begin and end. The COBOL is perform and end perform, if, end, if. But fundamentally, the words that we're writing, in your case, in lines 23 through 40, are exactly the same code as my last page, my lines 41 through 60.
Yeah, true. And I did. I
so
think
when you get experience with languages, you get to a point where the language doesn't matter. The structure of the data, which is all the data division and the working storage section in COBOL, is the piece that becomes the thing that you've got to work on. Or if we're talking SQL, it's the structure of the table and the row that comes back from the table. That's the piece that changes between programs, but fundamentally, do line 23 through 40 match, give or take some comments and some syntax, matches the way I did it.
True.
So Henry's got this final page which shows his whole program on a single screen and then the results of running it. and he found that entries 15 and 59 added up to 220. So he multiplies those together and gets the result. And then part 2 was an extension of what you had to do in part 1. Again, we've got something summing to 2020 and we're multiplying things together.
It was then the part 2 was now find 3 entries that add up to 2020.
Oh, right. That's how it was. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I just remember by seeing my own print screen there with the 3 entry numbers.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right, next.
Oh, yeah. Next is the slide with, I did some hunting, because if you do the Advent of Code, of course, there is Stack Overflow, Reddit, Twitter, loads of places where people are, crying out for, I can't solve this, or I've solved it this way. And you actually see the most archaic languages and weird solutions. This is, I think, 2 or 3 slides of some of the, what I would say, coolish solutions.
Well, someone's doing it in SQL there.
Yeah. For instance, the top one, this is where we get the crowd to be interactive, right? Do you know all these languages? The top one is 3 lines of Python, using a lot of hidden features in Python, right? It brings in the ITER tools framework module, if you wish. Of course, for the beginner programmer, these 3 lines are really hard to understand and know what's going on. It's basically nearly a one-liner, but yeah, short solution. Then bottom left indeed is somebody who loaded the input into an SQL database and just solved it through SQL. I don't know what the one on the right is. I'm guessing something JavaScript.
It's JavaScript.
Yeah. Which is, again, also very small in comparison to the REXX or the COBOL, if you're just taking line counts as a measurement, obviously. Maybe we can go
don't get me started on counting lines of code, because the best programs are the ones where you take a 10,000 line program and you strip 400 lines out of it because they're no longer needed. And now if you're counting lines of code, that's minus 400. Hey, you're not productive. You did minus 400 lines of code today.
Yeah, precisely.
Right, next. Oh my word. Someone doing it in assembler.
What is I think the left one is x86 assembly.
Looks very like x86 assembly, yep.
And the right one looks to me like something basic-y. I think
looks
it was
like
Amiga basic, but I'm not sure.
That almost looks like BBC basic.
Or BBC, it could be that too.
Or GB basic, as you would get on an old Amstrad computer. Yeah. The problem with basic is that once you've programmed anything in basic, that's it, you're damaged forever. You will never be a programmer if you write in basic. It's not quite true, because I started in basic, but I think we soon piled into Z80 assembler when we started doing stuff on a ZX80 back in the tail end of 79, the early start of 1980.
Yeah. Back in the time when I was learning to walk, Doogie.
Yeah, it did my brother okay. My brother has worked in embedded systems since forever, including skyboxes and every other piece of equipment that Alan Sugar made from Amstrad.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah,
next
so
one.
Just to show, that we have, this is the final one, right? This is the overview of, I think, an earlier Advent of Code that the guys at Advent of Code generate, or people from the community, is just, how many GitHub repositories for Advent of Code did we find in what language. It will be no surprise that REXX and COBOL are not part of the top 25 or 15 here. And the one to the right is one of my noteworthy finds. It's someone who's actually solving or trying to solve Advent of Code in Microsoft Excel every year, which is just as amazing as it is crazy.
Well, the underlying engine in Excel can be Visual Basic, so that maybe is an opportunity to do it in a spreadsheet, but write it in Visual Basic. I've done some Visual Basic in Excel. It's very, very strange.
Yeah.
Right, next.
Oh yes, accidental benefits. Well, we already hinted to this a bit, and also the call to action for peeps who want to, you know, brush up on their coding skills and or learn a new language to program in. That there are some accidental benefits that we're going to share in a generic form, and then like specified on our own actual language experiences. You want to do this one, Dougie, or?
Yeah. We'll do this one. Right. So the benefits are that you're doing something that's not your normal day job. Folks who write programs for their day job are going to probably write with the same fourth generation language, possibly something like Telon, every single day of the year. And this is, we're coding, in my case, native COBOL, and Henry's coding REXX, and exploring a different input data set every day, a different set of data to play with, and a different objective of the program. So you learn to do things. I found some COBOL functions where I was writing the function in plain COBOL, and I ended up reading the manual, because some days I do actually read the manual, and found there was a built-in COBOL function that did exactly the same thing in one line of COBOL instead of 100. So it wasn't so much as whether you could actually get the program to run. In fact, there was one day, there's a silver star on my results for that day, where I couldn't get my way of looking at the problem to run for part 2. The size of array I was trying to build exceeded the compiler limit. The best thing is that some days you would sit there and you would bat away at part 1 for some hours, and then suddenly you'd get the result, and then you'd look at part 2 and go, oh, well, that's a really easy change from part 1. There were some days where you looked at part 1 and it was easy to do, and you looked at part 2 and it's like, what the heck's Eric giving us today? There is a certain amount of satisfaction in getting my crappy code to run. I always have this view of, with any coding sample that I've got, is give it to your friends and sell it to your enemies, because just about everything I write is open source. It's, you know, it's just an example of how to do something, and therefore, you know, the bottom line is, it's free code. It's, you know, here's my way of doing it. You're free to use it. You're free to destroy it. You're free to use my ideas and do it your own way. There was a certain amount of satisfaction in getting it, the blasted things to run some days. Right, and the next file, these are the benefits I got from COBOL. This is the one that I found. Function numval. If you're trying to read a 4-digit character number, where you don't know whether there's leading spaces or leading zeros, numval will actually, you say the maximum length is 4 digits, read that, fit it into 4 digits however you like, basing on the fact that COBOL, one of the things COBOL is built for, and the best thing about COBOL, the whole reason for existing, is that it's good at money. It's good at writing £100 and 25 pence, or in Henry's case, €100 and 25 cents. That's COBOL's fundamental unique selling point, is it does 2 decimal points mathematics brilliantly. So there's a whole bunch of stuff to make handling numbers easier. The other thing is that my view, since I started doing programming on mainframes, is that the compiler or the assembler, whatever language I'm working in, can do a better job of checking syntax than I can. So I sit there with an edit session open, I do save, I go to SDSF, I do submit. Once I've submitted one, I'll just use SJ to pick up the JCL in SDSF so I can resubmit it. Well, one of the things that you'll fill up the spool. You'll fill up the spool with junk versions. When I work, I only ever keep the last execution of the compiler and the last execution of the program. So then if the program works, I can just purge the compiler listing off the spool. If the program fails, I can resubmit, change the code, resubmit the compiler. So I found that if you type submit semicolon end semicolon colon P colon colon, it will submit the job, end the SJ edit session, enter a P as a line command, and then press enter so that the P gets action, which is basically submit this, end out of it, purge this version off the spool. And I use that every single day of the year now, because I got sick of trying to find where the listing was on the spool and which listing belonged to me. My biggest problem, and the example we gave you for part one wasn't particularly good about it. I tend to over-engineer my COBOL because I'm writing COBOL programs that demonstrate things to people. And I tend to do way too much in terms of checking the return codes, displaying the results, and all sorts of stuff. The other thing I found with the advent of code was that it's not easy when the thing is designed for C, C++, Java, JavaScript, Python. Some days it was very difficult to even think about how to do some of the tasks in COBOL. And I said there was one where I blew the compiler limit. And if I hadn't blown the compiler limit, I'd have blown storage when I ran the program. Right. So would I do it again? I'm thinking about it. It is quite a task. It depends what I'm doing for my real day jobs. But I was thinking I might do it in PIL 1. My PIL 1 was a bit rusty. I hadn't used PIL 1 till a couple of years back for about 30 years. There was only ever one real big PIL 1 program that I ever wrote, and it was just to do a single task that I couldn't do in REXX. I was doing iteration in REXX, and I blew the stack limit. So I rewrote the program in PIL 1. So do it in PIL 1 because I might learn a trick. I've learned one new trick already this year, which is put edit rather than put skip data, which is much put edit. It gives you so much control over how it looks. The biggest problem I found was that some days I was staying up till way past midnight, trying to get the rotten program to actually complete. And you get so close that you go, oh, I'll just spend another 10 minutes doing this, and if not, I'll leave it till tomorrow. Because maybe I'm just not disciplined enough. The other reason for doing it in PIL 1 is because I am completely mad. And as I said earlier, when you want to pick a programming language, you get two choices. The one you know best or the one you want to learn next. And I've done that on some of the stuff I do with Raspberry Pis. I know C reasonably well. I'm not particularly good at C, and my C is a bit ugly. But I started writing stuff in C++. So this is my rule for programming. When someone says, what language do you want to do it in? You go, I'll do it in assembler. Why is that? Because I'm mad. Or I'll do it in REXX because that's the one I know. Or I'll do it in JavaScript because it's a nice, easy language. Or I'll do it in Java because it's a very elegant language. There's a whole bunch of reasons for picking a programming language. Right, this one's Henry's.
Oh, yeah.
Dougie, before you go on, what do you do for a main day job?
I'm a systems programmer and a database specialist. I write DL1, IMS hierarchical databases. And I also, because I hate it, I do SQL in DB2. I've done DB2 since 1986, and I've done IMS since 1982.
Is that freelance or do you work for someone?
I am freelance now. IBM sacked me after 20 years. So it made me redundant. So I spent a year off doing nothing. And then RSM, in the guise of Mark Wilson, phoned me up and said, do you want to do a DB2 job? And I said, yeah, go on then.
And are you still working for BMC Mainframe Services?
I was writing PL1 yesterday. I was writing exec DLI in PL1.
I'd love to see you writing this stuff in PL1 using our tools with the Git integration. That would be really interesting to stretch you in not only your programming stuff, but also demonstrating how PL1 has come on in the world. You know, in Europe, we've seen a real resurgence in PL1. Be interesting.
Yeah, PL1's a great language, and it's got lots and lots of built-in functions that are very, very carefully hidden. I admit that yesterday I ended up having the PL1 programming reference open all day because I was trying to find things. Henry's turn.
Else have any questions for these two interesting characters?
We'll just fly through the last ones, Stuart. Yeah, I did it in REXX last year, not mainly because I wanted to brush up, but I needed some real world Ziggy food to, you know, because I was testing Ziggy while doing this as well, because I managed all my GitHub commits of the solutions through Ziggy. I did learn quite some new REXX tricks while at it. One of them is, Dougie already mentioned this, some programming language have a plethora of nicely built-in functions. And when you're used to that in other languages, it was for me very awkward to not have a square root function in REXX. It was terrible. So you actually have to write your own square root function that approximates a square root, really funny mathy exercise. So that's one of the things I learned. Another thing I learned is that if you're coming from a Python background, lists and dictionaries are, you know, your bread and butter. In REXX, we have stems. They are not lists. I also learned the true power of parse. Figured out that the typelessness in REXX can be very handy, but it can also totally like blow your entire leg off. Recursion in REXX is tricky and blow up your entire TSO session. I had there were some puzzles where it was easier to have your input or intermediate results sorted. I started out sorting in REXX and I thought, well, I should be able to call Iceman or sort alternatives. So figured that out. One of the things day 8 last year was really cool. You got like some semi-assembly language as input, and you had to like get the output of the program. You had to really write a code parser. And at school, I hated those things, and this was actually really funny. So yeah, there's a lot of things that you learn, even if you are doing it in a language you think you know front to end. You can move them along, Dougie. Yeah. Oh yeah. Would I do it again? Yes, definitely. I'm not sure what language I'm going to be doing. I do have a hint towards wanting to do it all through Microsoft Visual Studio Code and the Zoe stuff, and not do it in ISPF TSO for a change. Definitely doing it on the mainframe again. Maybe do a mix where I roll the dice every day and think, okay, today's going to be Python, tomorrow is going to be a C list. As Dougie was saying, time is always an issue. I can totally feel what Dougie was saying. Sometimes you're sitting way past midnight thinking, I have to get this puzzle fixed. And well, sometimes you just can't get it solved. I do plan on recording, maybe streaming it on YouTube again, some of the, well, my cursing at the screen for why it doesn't work. And I would love to see more of you people join in this year too, if you can find the time and the the willingness for it, because it is actually really, really fun.
We've now taken away the redaction. Interestingly, that silver star 2 before the end of my line is the one where I blew the compiler. Because I got part 1 to work, but I could not get my way of doing part 2 to compile. Henry said that REXX is bad for lists. Now try doing a list in COBOL. We really don't have lists in COBOL. We have arrays. You can have multi-dimensional arrays with occurs depending on, but doing lists in COBOL is next to impossible. I think doing lists in PL1 might actually be possible. So those were the results, and Henry won the game by
Ever so slightly, huh?
Just a few points ahead of me,
Yeah.
like about 15 points. Right, so this is the super duper code for the 2021 leaderboard. The advent of code gives you, the website gives you instructions for how to join an existing group. Please come and join us. We like to have fun. If you send things on, if you want to tell us what you're doing, tell us on Twitter. Let us know what language you're planning to play in, whether you think you can do it, whether you need any help. Because this is one of the other things, is that we can do this as collaboration. You tell me what language you're writing it in, and we'll take a look at your code for you. If you put your code on GitHub, then everybody can see it, which is on the final page here. I've got my code on GitHub. Do not go and steal my code because it's ugly. If you don't have to pay for it, my code is free. Give it to your friends, sell it to your enemies, as usual. And I think we're just about at the tail end, and I think we're not too bad for time since we're coming up for 50 minutes there. So yeah, here's the final.
After all our hard practicing and dry runs, it's we've done quite according to expectation, Dougie.
Yeah, I think we did
precisely in 50 minutes. Cool.
Okay, though, and I will say thanks to Stuart for inviting us to participate in the GSE and doing it on this stream. It's my first attempt at doing things outside the IMS stream, because I usually bore people stiff with stuff about IMS. If you want me to bore you stiff with stuff about IMS, you'll have to wait till next year, because I'm not doing another presentation this year. But if you can fill in the feedback, there's the QR code for it. Scan the QR code with your form, fill it in, give us some feedback. And then there's one final slide, which is about GSE membership. You need to go and explain to your boss why your company needs to be part of GSE, because when we're back to a real venue, which I'm told will be back at Whittleby Hall in Northamptonshire, you may actually have to pay for the event, unlike these virtual ones, which I think we're doing for free. And there we go. That's it. Thank you very much. Questions?
Fantastic. Well, question, are you available next year? I'd love to get something IMSE, but at dev IMSE rather than database IMSE. It's another one of those things that exists, and we wanted to keep talking about it for diversity.
If you give me some ideas of what you'd like me to talk about, I can bore people till the end of eternity about IMS.
So anyone on the call, does anyone else have any questions for the pair of these nutters? They're adjective, not mine. No? Okay.
Oh, that's cool. Means it was all clear. Yeah, should you be joining in for the fun this year, please do. And maybe we can all do a bit of a broader code comparison at next year's GSE in the flesh, in 3D, and have some jokes about our troubles with the code solutions.
There will be a certain payment required. It comes in 568 milliliters for the Europeans. It comes in pints for the Brits. It's warm, it's brown, and I drink lots of it.
Cool.
Thanks all. Have a great GSE. Bye for now. Don't forget that feedback for AJ. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.